Hello my friend, and welcome back to some more Satisfactory. We looked at creating copper products yesterday, and we're kind of stuck to where we need a logistics upgrade in order to improve our setup. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to improve our setup with the logistics upgrades of conveyor splitters and conveyor mergers. All it takes is wire, rods, and plates to be able to do this. So it's relatively easy to put together. And we just made the upgrade. So now that we have that unlocked, you can see that we're looking at this on standby right now, and this is just filling up. It's actually almost full. We're going to go ahead and pull that wire, and we're going to scrap this constructor. Why? Well, it's simple. We want to be able to take this conveyor belt and split it into two different things. We want a storage container for wire, and we want another constructor that actually creates the cable and stores that as well. Sort of like we have for the iron. So let's take a look at the conveyor splitter. The conveyor splitter has 3 outputs and 1 input. So it makes sense that if we were to split right here and connect, we can have this conveyor go 3 different ways. Now we're going to want storage, and we're going to want constructor. So let's set a constructor, and we'll set a constructor like right here. We'll put the input going in here, and now we'll put down a storage container on the other side. All right, and now all we have to do is link them up with the conveyor belts. Let's connect the power to this sucker. And we don't have to power the splitter here, which is pretty good because we were already a little low on power, right? We configured this constructor to make cable. So all we're missing now is to put down a storage container. And the storage container, we want the input to be able to be accessed right near. This looks pretty good right there. Let's go ahead and we'll do it with a 90-degree angle here. So let's connect the conveyor. We'll make it come out to say here. We'll put another conveyor here. It's a little bit hard to get straight. There we go. And we'll make it go there. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. And now we're going to be storing cable as well as producing copper wire and storing that wire as well. Now what's interesting about the splitter is if you wanted to, you can change the way that these things feed. In order to change the way it feeds, you kind of have to manipulate conveyor belts. So there's no interaction that you can give this, but if you were to make 2 outputs go into the same storage, for instance, you would then get double the wire that goes into storage versus the wire that goes into cable. Right now it's splitting it evenly. So how do we do that? Well, that's simple. We have to use a merger. So the merger has 3 inputs and 1 output. And we can take the wire, for instance, and the storage that we had. Take it all down. It all goes into our inventory. No worries, no waste. We can take the conveyor belt and move it into one of the inputs here. And we can take the other one and move it into another input. Now, we have 2 sources of wire coming into 1 merger. Next, we can take the storage that we used earlier and set it down right next to here. And we can make the 90 again. And now it's going to go straight into there as well. Now, we literally have 2 feeds of wire coming into 1 conveyor belt, and you can see how sporadic the placement is of the wire on the conveyor belts versus here. So there is a conveyor belt capacity, but it's being doubled right here. So now we can see that we're storing all that wire here, and we're still producing the cable in this constructor coming into this storage. Now I'd like to look at something on a much grander scale, and this is going to be from my streaming world. So welcome to my streaming world. The first initial setup looks a lot like the world that I'm doing this YouTube series on. And what we have here are the 2 iron miners. It's in the same location on the map. and they're both moving ore into a couple of smelters, just like we have. But when I started learning logistics, I started doing things like this, and you can see that we're at a capacity maximum on the conveyor belts, and there's a bottleneck somewhere. So let's try to troubleshoot it. We have another iron node coming from here and another input coming from here, and the truth is we're creating a huge bottleneck here and slowing down production altogether. So what we want to do is have something that ultimately feeds into storage and that separates that storage into multiple conveyor belts. A brief look at one of my more advanced power setups shows a bunch of coal generators where I have two specific inputs coming from two different nodes of coal. Now, if I were to put one of the nodes of coal and another one of the nodes of coal into one conveyor belt, what would end up happening is the conveyor belt maximum would be capped and I couldn't get any further production. But this way, they feed into two separate inputs and I split them 3 ways apiece. So originally when I was thinking of this design, I thought we would be able to just go directly into one of the splitters. But what I noticed is that the conveyor belt was at maximum, or more what my Twitch chat told me. So what I ended up doing is taking a second input, and while it wasn't designed to be able to do this at first, I happened to be able to fit it in, and I put it into the input of the third setup. So I have 3 setups that ultimately separate into a storage container and a generator. The generator's at maximum, and every time they consume one coal product, this pushes one out to them. Meanwhile, all of the excess that can't go into the generator goes along this conveyor belt into a storage unit. Storage units all hold a ton of coal that could be repurposed for multiple generators that I have not dedicated yet. In hindsight, taking these coal outputs and filling more storage with them would even grant more backup. So coming back to our initial setup, what I think would be very, very productive for us to do would be to centralize storage. And it's something that I struggled with in my first playthrough, only because you don't have the ability to be really efficient until you start unlocking stuff. So we've automated some concrete before, so I think we're going to use this in order to make a little bit of a storage setup today. Currently, we have 5 storage units, all collecting different resources. We have concrete here, we have plates and rods, wire and cable. So let's take the inputs of a few storages and put them all on the bottom layer here. And we're going to unlock something that is going to help us organize some stuff. Let's go to conveyor walls, select milestone, and drop in the materials necessary to unlock this. So now we have a load of different walls to choose from with conveyor walls, and I think that the single conveyor walls will work for this particular setup. We could set the conveyor walls right here. We can connect these conveyor walls, and to make things easy for ourselves, we're just going to connect our existing storages to the conveyors. So after a few minutes of transporting all of the goods into their containers, we can now start to dismantle everything and increase our efficiency through better logistics. So the thing about dismantling everything is that you get 100% of the resources that you consume to do them back, so that you could just recreate them wherever you like in any order that you like. So what we have left now is pretty basic, I have to say. All we have are the miners, and so what we have right now is pretty basic. Our concrete setup is roughly the same because I wanted it to keep producing, but our iron setup are only the miners and the smelter, as well as the copper is only the miner and the smelter. So I'd like to be able to put the constructors a little bit closer to the storages here. So I'd like to set these constructors up to line up with the respective storage container, but they're a little bit wide. If we'll notice that if we put a constructor down right here and we take a look at the space that it takes up, it definitely takes up the whole tile. Now, can we put one right next to it? without encroaching on the space of the next tile over? And I think the answer is no. It already starts to creep over. So we're going to have a little bit of a tight issue. It's not that big of a deal because of the way that the separators work. So we have constructors now for the iron plates, the screws, the wire, and the cable. So all we have to do now is run the conveyor belts. Let's start off by bringing the concrete in. We'll connect that straight here. That ought to give us a good straight line. We'll run this conveyor all the way until just about even with this and make a nice angle. All right, and now our concrete conveyor belt is connected. Next is plates, then rods. And if you're having trouble marking stuff out and need to remember, you can always take out your plates, for instance, and just set them on the ground just next to them. One, or split the stack. We could do rods as well. Let's split the stack down to one and just drag this rod out onto the floor. Now we got rods right in front of it to represent what it's going to be. Rods, wire, and cable. And essentially all we have to do is line up all of our conveyor belts into their respective constructors, right? What about the last two with wire and cable? We still have to split those like we had them before. So we take this conveyor belt and we're going to split it. Now we just connect it up and there we go. Now we have the split. So we need to split three ways. Two going into one constructor and one going into the other constructor. So let's do one outside. We'll stop it like right there in the middle and make it follow this line. Now we take a merger and move the two sets of ingots coming directly in. The output for the merger is here. We'll run that right next to the other conveyor, and that'll lead right into the wire constructor. So all that's left now is to power it. And this is the type of setup I was thinking about. Running foundations over our entire existing setup, putting a series of biomass generators right on top, and running wire to each of our individual operations. So the math for this is relatively simple. The biomass generators create 20 megawatts of power each. And the setups are a little bit different. We have the miners that take 5, smelters that take 4, and constructors that take 4. We have a series of 4 miners, 1 on copper, 2 on iron, and 1 on concrete. We have 3 smelters, 1 on copper, 2 on iron. And we have 5 constructors underneath us. Well, 4 underneath us and 1 on the concrete. So we could say that we need 1 generator for miners by themselves, for 20 watts. 1 generator for constructors by themselves, which is 20 megawatts. And another generator for the smelters. So let's connect the grid together. First thing that we're going to want to do is put a pole down for each generator. Next, we're going to put some poles down for the constructors. After that, we're going to put poles down for each of the little operations that we have. And we're going to connect the grid first. Generators to their respective poles. All of the constructors connected here. All of the stations connected to one another. And now we just have to connect the poles to one another. To complete the circuit, take the last pole, connect it to the grid, and you can hear the power go off, right? So let's actually cut this down. We're going to fill these up with biomass, and we should only need 3. So let's go ahead and flip the switch. And so far, the network is staying on. And last but not least, just connect the constructors. And it looks like we're good. Concrete's online. Moving slow, albeit, but it's working. The iron is coming into place and everything's being constructed correctly. Copper is still being mined and produced, and everything's being put into their respective containers. And now that the basic resources that we have are being created and putting into storage, we can easily take these storages and work through feeds for constructors or assemblers or anything else that we need. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's more advanced logistics. Getting everything all organized. We have a scalable model that we can just continue to increase here by power, by production, and by mining. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. As always, this is Zueljin signing off, and we'll see you next time.